The fluorescent lights of Westfield Preparatory Academy buzzed overhead as 17-year-old Keisha Williams walked through the marble-floored hallway, her worn sneakers squeaking against the pristine surface. Unlike the designer boots and expensive loafers that clicked confidently around her, Keisha's footsteps seemed to apologize for their presence. The metallic glint of her braces caught the light as she kept her head down, clutching her second-hand backpack tighter against her shoulder. Westfield Prep wasn't just expensive. It was a monument to privilege, where tuition cost more than most families' annual income. Keisha was only here because of an academic scholarship, a fact that seemed to follow her like a shadow through the polished halls. The other students didn't need to be told she didn't belong. It was written in every thread of her discount store uniform, every careful step she took to avoid drawing attention. Well, look what we have here. A voice cut through the morning chatter like a blade. Keisha's stomach dropped. She knew that voice. Madison Thornfield, whose father owned half the city's real estate and whose mother sat on the school board. Madison stood near the trophy case with her usual entourage. Chelsea Hartwell, whose pharmaceutical fortune funded the school's new science wing, and Brittany Ashford, whose family's law firm had gotten more than one Westfield student out of serious trouble. "I thought I smelled something cheap," Madison continued, her voice carrying just loud enough for nearby students to hear. Her perfectly straight teeth gleamed in a smile that held no warmth. "Tell me, scholarship girl, did you remember to shower this morning? Or is that ode to poverty I'm detecting?" The hallway seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as students turned to watch the spectacle unfold. Some pulled out their phones, already sensing drama worth capturing. Keisha felt the familiar burn of humiliation creep up her neck, but she forced herself to keep walking. "I'm talking to you." Madison stepped directly into Keisha's path, forcing her to stop. "It's rude to ignore someone when they're speaking to you. Didn't your mother teach you any manners? Or was she too busy working 3 jobs to afford your little metal mouth?" Chelsea giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh my God, Madison, look at those braces. They're so chunky. Are those the free ones from the county clinic?" Keisha's hand instinctively moved to cover her mouth, but she caught herself. She'd worked after school for 8 months to help her mother pay for these braces, choosing function over the nearly invisible options that Madison and her friends undoubtedly wore. "Leave me alone," Keisha said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "What was that?" Madison cupped her ear theatrically. "I couldn't hear you over the sound of your desperation. Maybe speak up?" "Oh, wait. You probably can't with all that metal in your mouth." The crowd of students had grown, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Keisha noticed several teachers walking by, their eyes deliberately averted. Mr. Peterson, her English teacher, actually quickened his pace when he saw what was happening. "You know what I don't understand," Brittany chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Why someone like you would even want to be here. I mean, don't you feel uncomfortable? Out of place? Like you're pretending to be something you're not?" The words hit harder than any physical blow. Keisha had felt exactly that every day since starting at Westfield, but hearing it spoken aloud, in front of dozens of her peers, made her feel exposed and raw. "I have every right to be here," Keisha said, finding her voice. "I earned my place." Madison laughed, a sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Earned? Is that what you call it? Taking a spot that should have gone to someone who actually belongs here? Someone whose family built this school?" "Yeah," Chelsea added. "My dad donated the money for the new gym." "What has your family ever contributed besides?" "Well, nothing." The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, but the crowd showed no signs of dispersing. If anything, more students had gathered, drawn by the commotion and the promise of viral content. "Come on, girls," Madison said, her voice taking on a mock-sweet tone. "We shouldn't keep the scholarship student from her education. After all, she needs all the help she can get." As they walked away, their laughter trailing behind them like poison, Keisha stood frozen in the hallway. Students filed past her, some staring openly, others whispering. A few looked sympathetic, but none stopped to offer support. The first period bell had long since rung when Keisha finally moved, her legs feeling like lead. She was 20 minutes late to advanced chemistry, where she held the highest grade in the class, a fact that seemed meaningless now in the face of such public humiliation. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Dr. Martinez, the chemistry teacher, glanced up when Keisha entered but said nothing about her tardiness. The other students were already deep in their lab work, the scent of various chemicals mixing in the air. Keisha found her assigned partner, a quiet boy named David who always seemed more interested in his periodic table than in social hierarchies. "You okay?" David whispered as she sat down, his eyes showing genuine concern. Keisha nodded quickly, not trusting her voice. She threw herself into the lab work, finding comfort in the precision of measurements and the predictability of chemical reactions. Here, in the realm of science, things made sense. Actions had consequences. Results were measurable and fair. But even chemistry couldn't shield her from the whispers that followed her through the rest of the day. By lunch, it seemed like everyone had heard about the morning's incident. Some students looked at her with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with the kind of anticipation that suggested they were waiting for the next show. The cafeteria was a minefield of social hierarchies, and Keisha usually ate quickly and quietly at a corner table. But today, even that refuge felt exposed. She could feel eyes on her as she moved through the lunch line, could hear fragments of conversation that died when she passed. Scholarship girl, totally humiliated. Madison really went off on her. Keisha found her usual table and sat down with her tray, trying to focus on her sandwich. The cafeteria hummed with its usual chaos of conversations, clattering trays, and the occasional shout across the room. She was halfway through her meal when she heard the familiar sound of designer heels clicking across the floor. "Oh, look who's eating alone." Madison's voice carried across the nearby tables. "That's so sad. Don't you have any friends, Metalmouth?" Keisha kept her eyes on her food, but she could see Madison and her friends approaching in her peripheral vision. The conversations at nearby tables quieted as students sensed another confrontation brewing. "I'm talking to you," Madison said, now standing directly beside Keisha's table. "It's rude to ignore people. Didn't your mother teach you better?" "Oh wait, she's probably too busy scrubbing toilets to teach you proper manners." The insult about her mother hit like a physical blow. Keisha's hands clenched into fists under the table, but she forced herself to remain calm. Her mother worked 2 jobs to support them, as a nurse's aide at the hospital and cleaning offices at night. She worked harder than anyone Keisha knew, and she didn't deserve to be mocked by someone who had never worked a day in her life. "My mother is a good person," Keisha said quietly, finally looking up at Madison. "She works hard for everything we have." Madison's smile was cold as winter. "How noble, and how pathetic. Look around you, scholarship girl. This is a school for winners, for people who matter, not for people like you." Chelsea giggled and pulled out her phone. "Oh my God, this is perfect. Say something else, Madison. This is going to get so many views." The red recording light on Chelsea's phone felt like a spotlight, and Keisha realized with growing horror that this moment was being captured, probably to be shared across every social media platform before the day was over. "Are you recording this?" Keisha asked, her voice rising slightly. "Of course," Brittany said, also pulling out her phone. "The whole school should see this, should see you getting put in your place." Madison leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was still audible to the phones. "You don't belong here, and everyone knows it. You're just a charity case, a token to make the school look diverse, but we all know you're not really one of us. You never will be." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now, every eye focused on their table. Keisha felt the walls closing in around her, the weight of hundreds of stares pressing down on her shoulders. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, and never have to face another day at Westfield Prep. But then she remembered her mother's words from that morning. "Hold your head high, baby. You earned your place there. Don't let anyone tell you different." Keisha stood up slowly, her full height making her nearly eye level with Madison. "I do belong here. I earned my scholarship with a 4.0 GPA and perfect test scores. I've worked harder than you ever will, and I won't let you or anyone else make me feel ashamed of that." For a moment, Madison's confident facade flickered, surprise flashing across her face. But it was quickly replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Oh, she's got some fight in her," Madison said, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "How cute. Too bad fight doesn't buy you decent clothes or fix that hideous smile." The laughter from Madison's friends felt like ice water in Keisha's veins. She gathered her things quickly, desperate to escape before the situation escalated further. But as she turned to leave, Madison's voice followed her. "Running away? How typical. I guess that's what people like you do when things get tough. Keisha paused, her hand on her backpack strap. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to not give Madison the satisfaction of a response. But something deeper, something that had been building inside her for weeks, finally broke free. "I'm not running," Keisha said, turning back to face Madison. "I'm choosing not to waste my time on people who think money makes them better than everyone else." The cafeteria erupted in a mixture of gasps and murmurs. No one had ever stood up to Madison Thornfield like that, especially not someone from Keisha's social stratum. Madison's face flushed red, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Excuse me? Do you know who you're talking to? My father could have you kicked out of this school with one phone call." "Then maybe he should," Keisha replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Because I'm tired of pretending that being cruel makes you important." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison stared at Keisha with pure hatred, her hands trembling with rage. Chelsea and Brittany looked between their leader and Keisha, uncertain how to react to this unprecedented rebellion. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Madison said, her voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what you've just done." Keisha met her gaze steadily. "I stood up for myself. If that's a mistake, then I'm proud to make it." She turned and walked away, her head held high despite the chaos erupting behind her. The cafeteria exploded into conversations, everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed. Phones were everywhere, recording, sharing, spreading the confrontation across social media in real time. If you're enjoying this story of courage and standing up to bullies, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. But Keisha's moment of triumph was short-lived. As she walked through the halls for the rest of the day, she could feel the change in the atmosphere. The stares were different now, not just curious or pitying, but anticipatory. Word had spread about her confrontation with Madison, and everyone seemed to be waiting for the other shoe to drop. They didn't have to wait long. By the end of the school day, the video of their cafeteria confrontation had been edited and shared across every social media platform, but not in the way Keisha had hoped. The editing was masterful and malicious. Every moment that made Madison look bad had been cut out, leaving only Keisha's responses, which without context made her appear aggressive and confrontational. The captions were even worse. "Scholarship student attacks popular girl. Ungrateful recipient bites the hand that feeds her. This is what happens when you let the wrong people into good schools." Keisha discovered this when she got home and saw her phone exploding with notifications. The video had been tagged with her name, her school, and even her mother's workplace. The comments were a tsunami of hate and vitriol that made her stomach turn. She should be grateful for the opportunity instead of acting like she owns the place. Typical entitled behavior. This is why scholarships are a waste of money. Someone needs to put her in her place. Her mother found her crying in her room an hour later, the phone still buzzing with notifications. "Baby, what's wrong?" Dorothy Williams sat on the edge of Keisha's bed, her nurse's aide uniform still wrinkled from her shift. Despite working 14-hour days, she always made time for her daughter. Keisha showed her the video, watched her mother's face harden as she read the comments. Dorothy had faced her own share of discrimination and prejudice, but seeing her daughter targeted with such viciousness stirred something fierce and protective in her chest. "These people don't define you," Dorothy said firmly, taking the phone and setting it aside. "They're scared because you threatened their little bubble of privilege. That's why they're fighting so hard to put you back in what they think is your place." "Maybe they're right," Keisha whispered, her voice breaking. "Maybe I don't belong there. Maybe I should just transfer back to Lincoln High." Dorothy's hand was warm and steady on her daughter's shoulder. "You belong anywhere you have the courage to stand. Those girls don't own that school, and they sure don't own you. But baby, you need to be smart about this. These people have power, and they're not going to stop here." As if summoned by her words, Keisha's phone rang. It was Principal Davidson, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "Miss Williams, I need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We have some concerns about your behavior today." The call ended abruptly, leaving Keisha staring at her phone in disbelief. She was the one being called to the principal's office, not Madison, not the girls who had been tormenting her for weeks. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in bed thinking about the unfairness of it all, about how the same system that had given her a scholarship was now preparing to punish her for defending herself. She thought about her mother's words, about courage and belonging, and about the long road ahead. What Keisha didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Madison and her friends had been humiliated in front of the entire school, and in their world, that was an unforgivable offense. They had money, connections, and a complete lack of empathy, a dangerous combination that they were about to unleash with devastating precision. The next morning, Keisha arrived at school early, hoping to avoid the crowds and the stares. But as she walked through the front doors, she was immediately intercepted by Mrs. Henderson, the principal's secretary. "Miss Williams, you're to report to the principal's office immediately," she said, her voice professionally neutral, but her eyes sympathetic. Principal Davidson's office was a monument to institutional authority, with dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and photographs of him with various local dignitaries. He was a thin man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Miss Williams," he said, not looking up from the papers on his desk. "Sit down." Keisha sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled only by the ticking of an antique clock on the wall. "I've been reviewing the events of yesterday," Davidson finally said, his eyes still on his papers. "And I'm deeply concerned about your behavior. This school has a zero-tolerance policy for aggressive conduct, and the video evidence suggests you initiated a confrontation with Miss Thornfield." "That's not what happened," Keisha said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "They've been bullying me for weeks. Madison started the whole thing, and they edited the video to make it look like—" "Miss Williams," Davidson interrupted, finally looking up at her. "I understand you may feel out of place here. It's natural for students from different backgrounds to experience some adjustment difficulties, but that doesn't excuse aggressive behavior toward your fellow students." The words hit Keisha like a slap. Different backgrounds, adjustment difficulties, the coded language of discrimination, wrapped in administrative speak. "I wasn't aggressive," Keisha said, her voice rising slightly. "I was defending myself. They've been calling me names, making fun of my family, humiliating me in front of other students. Where was the zero-tolerance policy then?" Davidson sighed, the sound heavy with patronizing patience. "Miss Williams, I understand you may perceive certain social interactions as unwelcoming, but Miss Thornfield and her friends are from prominent families who have supported this school for generations. They understand our culture, our values. Perhaps if you made more of an effort to fit in, to understand your place here, these conflicts could be avoided." The subtext was clear. Know your place, stay in your lane, be grateful for the opportunity, and don't rock the boat. Keisha felt a cold fury building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "So, I'm supposed to just accept being bullied because they come from money?" she asked. "I'm saying that scholarship students have certain responsibilities," Davidson replied. "You represent not just yourself but the entire scholarship program. Your behavior reflects on our decision to admit students from less privileged backgrounds." The threat was implicit but clear. Step out of line, and the scholarship program could suffer. Other students like her might be denied opportunities because of her behavior. "I want to file a formal complaint about the harassment I've been experiencing," Keisha said, straightening her shoulders. "I have witnesses, and I'm sure there are other videos that show what really happened." Davidson's expression hardened. "Miss Williams, I would be very careful about making accusations against other students without proof. False accusations can have serious consequences for a scholarship student standing at this institution." The meeting ended with a final warning about Keisha's behavior and a strong suggestion that she consider whether Westfield Prep was the right fit for her. As she left the office, Keisha felt the weight of the system pressing down on her, protecting those who had power and punishing those who dared to challenge it. But if Principal Davidson and the Thornfield family thought they had intimidated her into submission, they had seriously underestimated Keisha Williams, because what none of them knew was that behind her quiet demeanor and second-hand clothes lay a strength forged in countless hours of training, discipline, and determination. That afternoon, instead of going straight home, Keisha took the bus to the other side of town, to a neighborhood where the houses were smaller and the streets were lined with old oak trees instead of manicured lawns. She walked up the familiar path to a small building with a simple sign, Yamamoto Martial Arts Academy. The dojo was a world away from the marble halls of Westfield Prep. The floors were worn wood, the walls lined with photographs of tournaments and trophies. The air smelled of sweat and determination, and the sound of students practicing filled the space with purposeful energy. "Keisha," a voice called out in surprise. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your fancy school." Sensei Yamamoto emerged from the back office, a small Japanese man in his 60s whose gentle demeanor masked decades of martial arts mastery. He had been Keisha's teacher for 8 years, watching her grow from a shy 9-year-old into a formidable competitor. "I needed to see you," Keisha said, and the story came pouring out. The harassment, the humiliation, the principal's threats, the feeling of being trapped in a system designed to keep her in her place. Sensei Yamamoto listened without interruption, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. "Do you remember why you started training here?" he asked finally. Keisha nodded. "Mom brought me after the kids at school were picking on me. She said I needed to learn to defend myself. And what did I teach you about strength? That real strength comes from discipline, respect, and knowing when to fight and when to walk away." "And what else?" Keisha closed her eyes, remembering countless lessons, countless hours of training. That the strongest fighters are those who never have to prove their strength. That martial arts is about protection, not aggression. "But also," Sensei Yamamoto said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "that there comes a time when walking away is no longer an option, when you must stand and fight, not for yourself, but for what is right." He stood and walked to the wall of photographs, pointing to one that showed a younger Keisha holding a gold medal, her braces gleaming in the camera flash. "National Junior Judo Champion," he said proudly. 3 years running. "Do you remember what you told me after that first championship? That I wanted to use my skills to help people," Keisha whispered. "The people at your school see a girl with braces and second-hand clothes. They don't see the warrior I trained. They don't see the countless hours of discipline, the pain overcome, the strength earned. They judge you by their shallow standards because they have no understanding of real strength." Sensei Yamamoto turned back to her, his expression serious. "But you must be careful, Keisha. These people have power in their world, and they will use it. If you choose to fight, you must be smart about it. You must be strategic. I don't know how to fight people like them," Keisha admitted. "They have money, connections, influence. What do I have?" "You have the truth," Sensei Yamamoto said simply. "And you have something they will never have. The strength that comes from overcoming real adversity. But most importantly, you have the training to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly when others lose their heads." He walked to his desk and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with years of training notes and philosophical observations. Sun Tzu wrote that the supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting. But he also wrote that if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. "What does that mean for me?" Keisha asked. "It means you need to understand your opponents, their weaknesses, their motivations, their fears. Madison Thornfield and her friends are bullies, but they're also cowards. They rely on their social status and their parents' money to protect them. Take that away, and they're powerless." "How do I do that?" Sensei Yamamoto smiled, the expression both gentle and fierce. "By being smarter than they are, by turning their own weapons against them, by making them reveal their true nature to the world." The conversation lasted until well into the evening, with Sensei Yamamoto sharing stories of his own experiences with discrimination and prejudice, and the lessons he'd learned about fighting injustice with both wisdom and strength. When Keisha finally left the dojo, she felt different, not just angry or hurt, but focused. She had a plan forming in her mind, a strategy that would require patience, discipline, and careful execution. But for the first time since starting at Westfield Prep, she felt like she had the tools to fight back. What she didn't know was that Madison and her friends were planning their own strategy, one that would push the conflict to a breaking point and force Keisha to make a choice between backing down and standing up for herself in the most public way possible. The next few days passed in an uneasy quiet. Madison and her friends seemed to be avoiding direct confrontation, but Keisha could feel their presence like a storm on the horizon. Whispers followed her through the halls, and she noticed teachers looking at her with a mixture of pity and wariness. Then came the invitation. It was slipped into her locker on a Friday afternoon, an elegant card with embossed lettering that read, "You're cordially invited to Madison Thornfield's birthday celebration. Saturday, 7 p.m., Thornfield Estate. Dress code, elegant attire." Keisha stared at the invitation in disbelief. After everything that had happened, Madison was inviting her to a party? It had to be a trap, but what kind of trap? She showed the invitation to her mother that evening, watching Dorothy's face grow concerned as she read it. "Baby, this doesn't feel right," Dorothy said, turning the expensive cardstock over in her hands. "Why would she invite you after everything that's happened?" "I don't know," Keisha replied, "but I think I have to go." "What? Why would you put yourself in that situation?" Keisha thought about her conversation with Sensei Yamamoto, about knowing your enemy and turning their weapons against them. "Because I think this is exactly what Sensei was talking about. They're planning something, and the only way to stop it is to be there when it happens." The Thornfield estate was everything Keisha had expected and more. The mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured grounds, with a circular driveway that could accommodate dozens of cars. Valets in crisp uniforms directed traffic, and the sound of music and laughter drifted through the warm evening air. Keisha had borrowed a dress from her cousin, a simple black number that was elegant but clearly not designer. She'd spent her last $20 on a small gift, feeling simultaneously overdressed and underdressed as she approached the front door. The party was in full swing when she arrived. The house was filled with Westfield prep students, all dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Keisha recognized faces from school, but saw none of the warmth or acceptance she'd hoped for. Instead, she was met with curious stares and whispered conversations that died when she passed. Madison appeared almost immediately, resplendent in a white dress that probably cost more than Keisha's mother made in a month. Her smile was bright and welcoming, but her eyes held a coldness that made Keisha's stomach clench. "Keisha, I'm so glad you came," Madison said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I wasn't sure you'd be able to make it. I know these kinds of events can be overwhelming for people who aren't used to them." The subtle dig was delivered with such grace that anyone listening might have missed it, but Keisha caught it immediately. This was going to be a long night. "Thank you for inviting me," Keisha replied, offering the gift she'd brought. "I hope you have a wonderful birthday." Madison accepted the gift with exaggerated enthusiasm, her voice carrying across the room. "Oh, how sweet. You didn't have to bring anything, but I'm sure it's lovely. Where did you get it, Target?" The laughter that followed was like glass breaking, and Keisha felt her face burn with embarrassment. She'd bought the gift at a local boutique, spending money she couldn't afford on a piece of jewelry that was simple but elegant. But in this room full of designer everything, it might as well have been from a gas station. "Actually," Keisha said, her voice steady despite the humiliation, "I got it from a local artist. I thought you might appreciate supporting small businesses." Madison's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "How thoughtful. I'll be sure to treasure it." The party continued around them, but Keisha could feel the undercurrent of tension. Madison's friends kept appearing at strategic moments, each interaction designed to highlight Keisha's outsider status. Comments about her dress, her shoes, her hair, all delivered with smiles and laughter that didn't reach their eyes. By the time they moved to the backyard for the main celebration, Keisha was exhausted from the constant assault on her dignity. The backyard was a wonderland of string lights, elegant decorations, and a DJ setup that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madison called out, climbing onto a small platform that had been set up for speeches. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with me tonight. It means so much to have all my friends here, people who really understand what friendship is about." The crowd cheered, raising their glasses in a toast. Keisha stood on the periphery, feeling more isolated than ever. "I want to take a moment to talk about something important," Madison continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "Community, belonging, the bonds that tie us together as Westfield prep students." Keisha's stomach dropped. She could see where this was heading. "We're all so fortunate to be part of such an amazing school community," Madison went on. "But sometimes, people join our community who don't quite understand our values, our traditions. People who think they can come in and change things, who don't appreciate what we've built here." The crowd was listening intently now, and Keisha could feel eyes turning toward her. Her heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm, to think like Sensei Yamamoto had taught her. "I believe in giving people chances," Madison said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "That's why I invited someone special tonight, someone who's been struggling to fit in, to understand her place in our community. Keisha Williams, where are you?" A spotlight suddenly illuminated Keisha, and she felt every eye in the party turn toward her. Her mouth went dry, but she forced herself to stand tall, to meet Madison's gaze across the crowd. There she is, Madison said, clapping her hands together. Our scholarship student. Come up here, Keisha, don't be shy. Keisha's mind raced. This was the trap, the moment Madison had been planning. She could refuse, could try to leave, but that would only give Madison the victory she was seeking. Instead, Keisha began walking toward the platform, her training kicking in. Stay calm, stay focused, be ready for anything. I want everyone to give Keisha a big round of applause, Madison said as Keisha approached the platform. She's been working so hard to fit in here at Westfield. It's not easy being the charity case, is it, Keisha? The words hit like a physical blow, but Keisha kept her expression neutral. Around her, the crowd was a mixture of uncomfortable silence and barely suppressed laughter. I know it must be hard, Madison continued, coming from your background, trying to keep up with students who were born to this life. But I want you to know that we appreciate the diversity you bring to our school. Keisha realized that phones were everywhere, recording every moment of her humiliation. This wasn't just about embarrassing her at the party. This was about creating content, about capturing her shame for the world to see. Would you like to say something, Keisha? Madison asked, extending the microphone toward her. Maybe tell everyone about your experience at Westfield, about how grateful you are for the opportunity. This was it, the moment of truth. Keisha could play along, could thank Madison and retreat into silence, preserving what little dignity she had left. Or she could do what Sensei Yamamoto had taught her, turn her opponent's strength against them. Keisha took the microphone, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what the scholarship student would do when cornered. Thank you, Madison, Keisha said, her voice clear and strong. You're right that coming to Westfield has been an education. I've learned so much about different kinds of people, different values, different ways of looking at the world. She paused, scanning the crowd, seeing the mix of anticipation and discomfort on their faces. I've learned that some people think money makes them better than others, that some people think cruelty is sophisticated, that bullying is just part of growing up. I've learned that there are people who will smile to your face while stabbing you in the back, who will use their privilege as a weapon against those who have less. The crowd was completely silent now, and Keisha could see Madison's face changing, her confident smile beginning to crack. But I've also learned something else, Keisha continued, her voice gaining strength. I've learned that real strength doesn't come from your parents' bank account or your last name. It comes from facing adversity with dignity, from standing up for what's right even when it's hard, from lifting others up instead of tearing them down. Madison reached for the microphone, but Keisha continued, her voice carrying across the suddenly tense crowd. So yes, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be at Westfield. Not because I get to rub shoulders with the wealthy and privileged, but because I get to show that character isn't inherited. It's earned. And every day that I hold my head high in the face of your cruelty, every day that I choose kindness over retaliation, I'm earning something that no amount of money can buy. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's face was white with rage, and Keisha could see her friends looking uncertain, as if they weren't sure how to respond to this unprecedented rebellion. Get off my stage, Madison hissed, her composure finally cracking. Get out of my house. You don't belong here. You're right, Keisha said, handing back the microphone. I don't belong here, because I belong somewhere better. Somewhere where people are judged by their actions, not their addresses. She turned to leave, but Madison's voice stopped her cold. Don't you dare walk away from me, Madison snarled, her mask of civility completely gone now. You think you're so much better than us? You're nothing but a charity case who should be grateful we even let you breathe the same air as us. The crowd gasped, and Keisha could see some of the guests looking uncomfortable now, as if Madison had gone too far even for them. But Madison was beyond caring about appearances. Your mother cleans toilets for a living, Madison continued, her voice rising to a shout. You wear secondhand clothes and smile with that hideous metal mouth, and you think you can come into my house and lecture me about character? Something snapped inside Keisha. She had endured weeks of harassment, had maintained her dignity in the face of constant humiliation, had turned the other cheek more times than she could count, but attacking her mother crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Don't you ever, Keisha said, her voice low and dangerous, talk about my mother again. Madison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Or what? What are you going to do about it, scholarship girl? Call your mommy to come clean up this mess? The crowd was completely silent now, sensing that something fundamental had shifted. Even Madison's closest friends looked nervous, as if they could feel the danger radiating from Keisha's suddenly still form. "My mother," Keisha said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent party, "works 2 jobs to support our family. She saves lives as a nurse's aide and maintains office buildings so that people like your father have clean places to work. She's never hurt anyone, never looked down on anyone, never used her position to make someone else feel small. She's worth 10 of you." "She's nothing," Madison spat. "And so are you. You're nothing but—" Madison never finished the sentence. In her rage, she had stepped closer to Keisha, close enough to give the final insult maximum impact. But she had also stepped close enough for Keisha to react when Madison raised her hand as if to slap her. 8 years of judo training kicked in automatically. As Madison's hand moved toward her face, Keisha's muscle memory took over. She caught Madison's wrist with her left hand, stepped to the side, and used Madison's own momentum to send her stumbling forward. It wasn't a throw, barely even a defensive move, but Madison's expensive heels and the momentum of her own attack sent her sprawling onto the grass. The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. Madison scrambled to her feet, her white dress stained with grass and dirt, her perfect hair disheveled. Her face was twisted with humiliation and rage. "She attacked me!" Madison screamed, pointing at Keisha. "Did you all see that? She attacked me. Call the police." But Keisha had already seen the phones recording everything, had seen the guests who had witnessed Madison's attempt to strike first. She stood calmly, her hands at her sides, waiting for what would come next. "I defended myself," Keisha said simply. "You tried to hit me. Everyone saw it." "Liar!" Madison shrieked. "You attacked me. You assaulted me in my own home." Chelsea and Brittany rushed to Madison's side, but their certainty seemed shaken. They had seen what really happened, and they knew that the video evidence would show Madison throwing the first strike. "Madison," Chelsea whispered urgently, "maybe we should—" "No," Madison cut her off. "I want her arrested. I want her expelled. I want her destroyed." But the crowd was already beginning to disperse, conversations buzzing with what they had witnessed. Some students looked at Keisha with newfound respect, others with fear or uncertainty. But many were already sharing videos, and Keisha could see that for the first time, the full context of a confrontation was being captured and shared. As Keisha walked away from the party, her heart racing but her head held high, she knew that Monday would bring new challenges. Madison would not let this humiliation stand, and she had the power and resources to make Keisha's life very difficult. But for the first time since starting at Westfield Prep, Keisha felt like she had some power of her own. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Keisha spent Saturday evening and all of Sunday replaying the party in her mind, wondering what consequences Monday would bring. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, some supportive messages from classmates who had witnessed Madison's behavior, but many more threatening or hateful responses from those loyal to the Thornfield family. The videos from the party had spread across social media, but unlike the edited cafeteria footage, these showed the full context of what had happened. Madison's attempt to strike Keisha was clearly visible, as was Keisha's measured defensive response. The comments sections were battlegrounds, with students choosing sides and adults weighing in on everything from school policies to parenting. Dorothy Williams watched her daughter with growing concern, seeing the weight of the situation pressing down on Keisha's shoulders. "Maybe it's time to consider other options," she said gently on Sunday evening as they sat together in their small living room. "There are other schools, other opportunities. You don't have to put yourself through this." "If I leave now," Keisha replied, "they win. And what about the next scholarship student? What happens to them if I don't stand up to this?" Dorothy smiled sadly, recognizing her own stubborn streak in her daughter. "You can't save everyone, baby. Sometimes the best thing you can do is save yourself. Sensei Yamamoto always taught me that martial arts isn't just about protecting yourself," Keisha said. "It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. If I run away now, I'm abandoning that principle." Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Keisha dressed carefully, choosing her clothes with the knowledge that every detail would be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged. She wore her best outfit, a simple blue dress that her mother had bought for her 16th birthday, paired with the only dress shoes she owned. The atmosphere at Westfield Prep was electric with tension. Students clustered in groups, their conversations dying as Keisha passed. Some nodded or smiled in support, but others stared with open hostility. The hallways felt like a minefield, every step potentially triggering an explosion. Madison was absent from first period, and Keisha allowed herself a moment of hope that perhaps the other girl had been embarrassed enough to stay home. But that hope was shattered during second period when Mrs. Henderson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Keisha Williams, please report to the principal's office immediately." The walk to the administrative office felt like a march to execution. Students lined the hallways, whispering and pointing as she passed. When she arrived at the main office, she found more than just Principal Davidson waiting for her. Madison sat in one of the leather chairs, flanked by her parents. Richard Thornfield was exactly what Keisha had expected. A tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated the kind of confidence that came from never having to question his place in the world. Cynthia Thornfield was equally polished, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes creating an aura of untouchable sophistication. But it was the third adult in the room who made Keisha's heart sink. Detective Sarah Chen from the local police department sat across from the principal's desk, her expression neutral, but her presence ominous. "Miss Williams," Principal Davidson said without preamble, "please sit down. We have some serious matters to discuss." Keisha took the remaining chair, acutely aware of how her discount store dress looked in comparison to the expensive clothing surrounding her. The power dynamic in the room was clear. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely alone. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornfield have filed a complaint alleging that you assaulted their daughter at a private party on Saturday evening," Davidson continued. "Detective Chen is here to investigate these allegations." "That's not what happened," Keisha said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Madison tried to hit me. I defended myself. There's video evidence." Richard Thornfield leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Young lady, my daughter is the victim here. She was hosting a party at our home, a party you had no business attending, and you physically attacked her in front of dozens of witnesses." "I was invited," Keisha replied, "and I didn't attack anyone. I prevented myself from being struck." "Prevented yourself from being struck?" Cynthia Thornfield's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You threw my daughter to the ground like some kind of street fighter." Detective Chen spoke for the first time, her voice professionally neutral. "Miss Williams, I've reviewed the video footage from the party. While it does show some kind of physical altercation, the quality and angles make it difficult to determine exactly what happened." Keisha's heart sank. She had seen the videos herself. They clearly showed Madison attempting to strike first, but if the police were claiming the footage was unclear, it meant the investigation was already biased. "What I can say," the detective continued, "is that you clearly had physical training that allowed you to overcome Miss Thornfield quickly and effectively. That suggests a level of intent and capability that goes beyond simple self-defense." The words hit Keisha like a physical blow. Her years of martial arts training, something she had always been proud of, were being twisted into evidence of aggressive intent. "I've been studying Judo since I was 9, Keisha said, "but I was taught to use it only for defense, never for aggression." "Judo?" Richard Thornfield's eyebrows rose. "You're trained in martial arts? That's not mentioned anywhere in your scholarship application." Principal Davidson shuffled through papers on his desk, frowning. "No, it's not. Miss Williams, why didn't you disclose your martial arts background when you applied to Westfield?" "Because it wasn't relevant," Keisha replied, confusion mixing with her growing anger. "It's a sport, like basketball or soccer. Why would I need to disclose it?" "Because," Cynthia Thornfield said, her voice rising, "it makes you a weapon. Our daughter is a 17-year-old girl who was attacked by someone with years of combat training. This wasn't a fight between equals. This was assault by someone who should have known better." "Combat training?" Keisha couldn't keep the incredulity out of her voice. "Judo is about discipline, respect, and self-improvement. It's taught in schools. It's an Olympic sport. I'm not some kind of weapon." "Tell that to my daughter's bruises," Richard Thornfield said coldly. "Tell that to the psychological trauma she's experiencing from being attacked in her own home." Detective Chen took notes throughout the exchange, her expression revealing nothing. When the adults finished speaking, she turned to Keisha with a look that held no warmth. "Miss Williams, given your martial arts background and the severity of the allegations, I'm going to have to ask you to come to the station for formal questioning. Your parent or guardian will need to be present." The words hit Keisha like ice water. She was going to be arrested, charged, potentially convicted of assault for defending herself against a bully. The system that was supposed to protect her was instead being weaponized against her. "This is insane," Keisha said, her voice breaking slightly. "She's been bullying me for weeks. She tried to hit me, and when I stopped her, I'm the one being arrested." "Miss Williams," Principal Davidson said, his voice taking on a warning tone, "I would suggest you be very careful about making accusations against other students, particularly students whose families have been so generous to this institution." The threat was clear: back down or face the full weight of the system coming down on her head. Keisha looked around the room at the adults who held her future in their hands, seeing nothing but cold calculation and predetermined outcomes. "I want to call my mother," she said quietly. "Of course," Detective Chen replied. "She'll need to meet us at the station." As they prepared to leave, Richard Thornfield leaned close to Keisha, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You made a mistake when you decided to come after my family," he whispered. "I'm going to make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." The ride to the police station was a blur of sirens and shame. Keisha sat in the back of the patrol car, her hands trembling as she watched Westfield Prep disappear in the rearview mirror. Students lined the windows of the school, their phones capturing her arrest for social media posterity. At the station, Dorothy Williams was already waiting, her face drawn with worry and exhaustion. She had left work immediately upon receiving Keisha's call, risking her job to be there for her daughter. "What's happening?" Dorothy asked, pulling Keisha into a fierce hug. "They said you were arrested for assault?" "The Thornfield girl tried to hit her at a party," Keisha explained quickly. "When I defended myself, they said I attacked her. They're using my judo training against me, saying it makes me dangerous." Dorothy's face hardened with understanding. She had seen this kind of system manipulation before, had experienced the way wealth and privilege could twist justice into a weapon against the powerless. "We need a lawyer," she said firmly. "We can't fight this alone." But lawyers cost money they didn't have, and the Thornfields had resources that could fund legal battles for years. As they sat in the sterile police station waiting room, both women understood that they were facing a system designed to protect people like Madison Thornfield and punish people like them. The formal interview was a masterclass in intimidation. Detective Chen and her partner, Detective Rodriguez, alternated between sympathetic questioning and aggressive accusation, trying to get Keisha to admit that she had used excessive force or had intended to hurt Madison. "You have to understand," Detective Chen said, leaning forward across the metal table. "A trained martial artist has a responsibility to control their strength. When you chose to use your skills against an untrained opponent, you crossed a line." "I didn't choose anything," Keisha replied for the 100th time. "I reacted instinctively when someone tried to hit me. That's what training is for, to respond automatically to threats." "But you could have walked away," Detective Rodriguez interjected. "You could have left the party before things escalated." "Why should I have to leave?" Keisha asked. "I was invited. I was defending myself from harassment when Madison decided to try to hit me. Why is this my fault?" The questioning went on for hours, with the detectives returning again and again to Keisha's martial arts background, as if her years of training somehow made her the aggressor in every situation. They seemed particularly interested in her competitive success, treating her medals and championships as evidence of dangerous capability rather than athletic achievement. Finally, Dorothy had heard enough. "We're not answering any more questions without a lawyer present," she said firmly. "You've asked the same things dozens of times, and my daughter has been completely honest with you." Detective Chen smiled thinly. "That's your right, of course. But I should let you know that the Thornfields are pushing for this to be charged as assault with a deadly weapon, given Miss Williams's martial arts background. Without cooperation, this could become very serious very quickly." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Dorothy took Keisha's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll take our chances with a lawyer," she said. They were finally released late that evening, but with the understanding that charges would likely be filed within the week. As they drove home through the darkened streets, both women were silent, processing the enormity of what they faced. "Mom," Keisha said finally, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for bringing this down on us." Dorothy pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her daughter, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Don't you ever apologize for standing up for yourself," she said fiercely. "What they're doing to you is wrong, and I won't let you carry the guilt for their prejudice and hatred." "But what if they win? What if I go to jail or get expelled or—" "Then we'll deal with it," Dorothy interrupted. "Together. But I won't let you give up and I won't let you break. We're going to fight this, baby. We're going to fight this with everything we have. The next morning brought a new wave of media attention. The story had spread beyond social media, picked up by local news outlets who framed it as scholarship student attacks classmate at exclusive party. The coverage was slanted heavily in favor of the Thornfields, portraying Madison as an innocent victim and Keisha as an aggressive outsider who had infiltrated polite society. The comments sections were even worse, filled with racist rhetoric and class-based hatred that made Keisha's stomach turn. But buried among the vitriol were messages of support from people who saw through the narrative, who recognized the injustice of what was happening. One message in particular caught her attention. It was from someone calling themselves Judo Fan 2015, who claimed to have seen Keisha compete at nationals. "I watched you win the championship 3 years ago," the message read. "You were the most disciplined, respectful competitor I've ever seen. Anyone who knows anything about martial arts knows that what you did at that party was pure self-defense. Don't let them destroy you." The message gave Keisha hope, but it also reminded her of something she had been trying to forget: her competitive career, the years of training and dedication that had made her a champion. She hadn't competed in over a year, focusing instead on academics and her part-time job to help her mother with expenses. But now, she wondered if her athletic achievements might be the key to fighting back against the narrative being built around her. That afternoon, she took the bus back to Sensei Yamamoto's dojo. Needing the familiar comfort of the training space and her mentor's wisdom, she found him teaching a children's class, watching with gentle attention as a group of 8-year-olds practiced their basic techniques. "Discipline first," he called out to the young students. "Power without control is not strength, it is weakness." The lesson ended, and the children bowed respectfully before running to their parents. Sensei Yamamoto approached Keisha with concern evident in his weathered features. "I saw the news," he said simply. "Tell me what really happened." Keisha recounted the events of the party and the police station, watching her teacher's expression grow increasingly troubled. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, his hands folded behind his back as he paced the length of the dojo. "They're using your strength against you," he said finally, "making your training into a liability instead of an asset. This is an old tactic, used against people like us for generations." "What do you mean, people like us?" Sensei Yamamoto gestured to a photograph on the wall, a black and white image of a young Japanese man in military uniform. "My father, 1943, he said quietly. "Interned during the war because his strength, his knowledge of martial arts, was seen as a threat. Never mind that he was born in California, that his brothers fought for America in Europe. His skill made him dangerous in the eyes of those who feared him." Keisha stared at the photograph, understanding flooding through her. "They're afraid of me. They're afraid of what you represent," Sensei Yamamoto corrected. "A young black woman who doesn't know her place, who has skills they can't control, who refuses to be intimidated by their money and status. You threaten their entire worldview. So what do I do?" Sensei Yamamoto turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "You do what warriors have always done when faced with overwhelming odds. You find allies, you choose your battles carefully, and you strike where they're weakest." "I don't understand." "The Thornfields think they control the narrative because they control the media, the police, the school administration. But there's one arena where money doesn't matter, where truth can still prevail." "What's that?" "The court of public opinion, when it's presented with undeniable evidence. They want to make you into a villain, a dangerous outsider who attacked an innocent girl. But what if the public could see who you really are? What if they could see the years of discipline, the respect for others, the true character that your training has built?" Keisha began to understand what he was suggesting. "You want me to tell my story, my real story. I want you to show them who you are," Sensei Yamamoto replied. "Not through words, but through actions, through the principles you've lived by for 8 years. He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder thick with photographs, newspaper clippings, and tournament records. "Your competitive history," he said, handing her the folder. "Every tournament, every medal, every example of the sportsmanship and character you've shown over the years. This is who you really are, Keisha. This is the person they're trying to destroy." As Keisha flipped through the photographs, she saw herself growing up through the lens of competition, the shy 9-year-old who had started training to escape bullies, The determined 12-year-old who had won her first regional championship. The focused 16-year-old who had claimed the national title while maintaining a perfect academic record. In every photo, she saw the same things: discipline, respect, determination, and joy. This was the person she had forgotten in the face of weeks of harassment and humiliation. "I want to help you tell this story," Sensei Yamamoto said. "But more than that, I want to help you remember who you are. The Thornfields want you to feel powerless, to see yourself as a victim. But you're not a victim, Keisha. You're a warrior." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we document the truth. Your training, your philosophy, your character. Let people see the real Keisha Williams, not the caricature the Thornfields are trying to create." "How?" Sensei Yamamoto smiled, the expression both gentle and fierce. "Leave that to me. But first, you need to get back on the mat. You need to remember what you're capable of, and you need to prepare for the battle ahead." "I thought you said martial arts was about avoiding fights." "It is," he replied. "But sometimes the fight comes to you anyway, and when it does, you'd better be ready." That evening, Keisha returned home to find her mother pacing the small living room, a determined expression on her face. "I found us a lawyer," Dorothy announced. "Pro bono. Her name is Jessica Martinez, and she specializes in civil rights cases." "How did you manage that?" Keisha asked, surprised. "I called everyone I could think of, explained the situation, and someone finally listened. She wants to meet with us tomorrow after school." Keisha felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. "What did you tell her?" "The truth," Dorothy replied. "That my daughter is being railroaded by people with money and power, and that she needs someone to fight for her who understands how the system really works." "Mom," Keisha said, "there's something else. Sensei Yamamoto wants to help tell my story, to show people who I really am." Dorothy nodded slowly. "That's good, because if we're going to fight this, we need people to see past the lies they're telling about you." "Are you sure about this? It could get ugly. The Thornfields have a lot of power." Dorothy pulled her daughter close, holding her tight. "Baby, they picked the wrong family to mess with. I didn't work 3 jobs to put you through school just to watch some spoiled rich kids destroy you. We're going to fight, and we're going to win." "How can you be so sure?" "Because," Dorothy smiled, "they may have money and connections, but they made one critical mistake." "What's that?" "They underestimated us. They looked at a single mother and her scholarship student daughter and thought we'd be easy to crush. They have no idea what we're really made of." As mother and daughter sat together planning their strategy, neither of them knew that across town, the Thornfields were planning their own escalation. Richard Thornfield had called in favors from judges, district attorneys, and media contacts, determined to make an example of Keisha Williams that would serve as a warning to any other outsiders who might challenge the established order. But they had also made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that Keisha was alone, that she had no resources or support beyond her working-class mother. They had no idea that she was about to become the center of a movement that would expose their tactics to the harsh light of public scrutiny. The battle lines were drawn, and the real fight was about to begin. This is about to get intense. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because stories like this one show us what real strength looks like. What's your prediction for how this ends? Drop it in the comments below. The law office of Martinez and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, a far cry from the marble and mahogany establishments that the Thornfields were accustomed to. But Jessica Martinez's credentials spoke for themselves. Harvard Law, former prosecutor, and a track record of taking on powerful defendants who thought their money made them untouchable. "Tell me everything," Martinez said, leaning back in her chair as she studied Keisha and Dorothy across her cluttered desk. "And I mean everything. The harassment, the party, the arrest. All of it." For the next 2 hours, Keisha recounted her story in detail, with Martinez taking notes and occasionally asking pointed questions. When Keisha finished, the lawyer was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. "This is bigger than just a simple assault case," Martinez said finally. "What they're doing is systematic intimidation, using the legal system as a weapon against someone who threatened their social order. It's classic privilege protection." "Can we win?" Dorothy asked directly. "We can," Martinez replied, "but it's going to require more than just proving Keisha's innocence. We need to expose the pattern of behavior, the institutional bias, the whole corrupt system that enabled this." "How do we do that?" Martinez smiled grimly. by making this case about more than just one incident, by showing that this is part of a larger pattern of discrimination and abuse, and by making sure the public understands exactly what's at stake here. What does that mean? It means we go public. We tell your story, the real story, in a way that the Thornfields can't control or manipulate. We show people who you really are, and we make them understand that what's happening to you could happen to anyone who challenges the status quo. Over the next few days, Martinez worked with Sensei Yamamoto to document Keisha's martial arts background, collecting character references from coaches, competitors, and tournament officials who had known her for years. The picture that emerged was of a young woman whose dedication to her sport was matched only by her commitment to its principles of respect and discipline. Meanwhile, Keisha returned to the dojo for the first time in months, reconnecting with the training that had shaped her character. As she moved through familiar techniques and exercises, she felt pieces of herself clicking back into place. "Your balance is off," Sensei Yamamoto observed as she practiced throws with one of the advanced students. "You're thinking too much, trying to force the techniques instead of letting them flow." "I can't stop thinking about what's happening," Keisha admitted. "About court, about school, about everything." "The mind of a warrior must be like water," her teacher replied. "Clear, adaptable, able to flow around obstacles. Your opponents want you angry, want you reactive. Don't give them that power." As the training session continued, Keisha felt the familiar calm of focused concentration settling over her. This was who she was, not the victim the Thornfields wanted to create, but a disciplined athlete who had learned to channel her strength in positive directions. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Other students in the dojo began sharing their own stories of meeting Keisha at tournaments, of witnessing her sportsmanship and character. Word spread through the martial arts community, and support began to build from an unexpected quarter. "Sensei," Keisha said after class one evening, "why are you doing all this for me? I know you're taking a risk getting involved." Yamamoto's expression grew serious. "Do you know why I came to America, Keisha? You said you wanted to teach martial arts." "That's true, but not the whole truth. I came because I believed in the American dream, the idea that in this country you could be judged by your character and your effort, not by where you came from or what you looked like." He gestured to the photographs on the dojo walls, pictures of students from every background and ethnicity. "For 40 years, I've watched young people like you discover their strength, their discipline, their potential, and I've seen too many of them crushed by systems designed to keep them in their place. I won't let that happen to you, not if I can help it. What if we lose? What if they're too powerful? Then we lose fighting," Yamamoto replied. "But sometimes the fight itself is the victory. Sometimes standing up to injustice, even when you can't win, inspires others to stand up as well." The first break in the case came from an unexpected source. David Kim, Keisha's lab partner from chemistry class, approached Jessica Martinez through his parents, who were local civil rights activists. "I've been filming Madison and her friends for weeks," he told the lawyer nervously. "Not in a creepy way," he added quickly. "I was documenting the bullying for a social justice project. I have hours of footage showing what they've been doing to Keisha. The videos were damning. Clear evidence of harassment, intimidation, and cruelty that painted a picture of systematic bullying that the school administration had ignored. More importantly, they showed the pattern of behavior that led up to the party confrontation. This changes everything," Martinez told Keisha and Dorothy. "With this evidence, we can show that Madison was the aggressor not just at the party, but for weeks leading up to it." "Will the police look at it?" Keisha asked. "The police won't have a choice," Martinez replied, "because we're going to make this case public in a way they can't ignore." The strategy was two-pronged. A legal defense based on the evidence of systematic harassment and self-defense, combined with a public relations campaign that would expose the truth about what was happening at Westfield Prep. Martinez filed a motion to dismiss the assault charges, accompanied by a civil rights complaint against the school district for failing to protect Keisha from harassment. But more importantly, she organized a press conference that would present the real story to the public. The night before the press conference, Keisha couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would either vindicate her or destroy her completely. She sat in her room, looking through the folder of martial arts achievements that Sensei Yamamoto had compiled, trying to remember who she had been before Madison Thornfield entered her life. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Tomorrow you're going to regret ever messing with the wrong family. Some people need to learn their place. Keisha stared at the message, feeling a chill run down her spine. The Thornfields weren't content to fight her in court. They were trying to intimidate her into backing down. She showed the message to her mother, who immediately forwarded it to Jessica Martinez. "Document everything," Martinez told them over the phone. "This kind of intimidation is exactly what we need to show the pattern of abuse." The press conference was held on the steps of the courthouse, with Martinez, Sensei Yamamoto, and several of Keisha's former competitors standing beside her. A small crowd of reporters and supporters had gathered, along with a few protesters holding signs supporting the Thornfields. "We're here today," Martinez began, "to expose a grave injustice. Keisha Williams, a straight-A student and national martial arts champion, is being prosecuted for defending herself against a pattern of harassment and bullying that the authorities have ignored." She presented the evidence methodically: the videos of harassment, the character references from the martial arts community, the documentation of Keisha's academic and athletic achievements. The picture that emerged was of a young woman of exceptional character being targeted by privileged bullies who expected their wealth to protect them from consequences. When it was Keisha's turn to speak, she felt the familiar calm of competition settling over her. This was just another tournament, another test of her preparation and character. "I came to Westfield Prep to get an education," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I worked hard for my scholarship, maintained a perfect GPA, and tried to represent my school with pride. But from my first day, I was made to feel like I didn't belong, like I was a charity case who should be grateful for whatever treatment I received." She paused, scanning the crowd of reporters and cameras. "I've spent 8 years studying martial arts, not to hurt people, but to develop discipline, respect, and self-control. Those values guided me when I was being harassed, when I was being humiliated in front of my classmates, when I was being told that my mother's honest work made me less worthy of respect." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "When Madison Thornfield tried to strike me at her party, I did exactly what my training taught me to do. I protected myself using the minimum force necessary. But because I had the skills to defend myself effectively, because I refused to be a victim, I'm the one being painted as the aggressor. This isn't just about me," Keisha concluded. "It's about every student who's been told they don't belong, every young person who's been bullied by those with more money or status, everyone who's been made to feel that their worth is determined by their background rather than their character." The questions from reporters were sharp and probing, but Keisha answered them with the same calm confidence she'd shown in competition. When one reporter asked if she regretted defending herself, her answer was immediate. "I regret that it was necessary," she said, "but I don't regret standing up for myself and my family. If that makes me dangerous in the eyes of some people, then so be it." The press conference. The press conference made national headlines within hours. Justice for Keisha began trending on social media, with martial arts communities, civil rights organizations, and ordinary people sharing their own stories of bullying and institutional bias. The public response was overwhelming. Videos of Keisha's tournaments surfaced, showing her helping fallen opponents, bowing respectfully to competitors, and displaying the kind of sportsmanship that made a mockery of the dangerous aggressor narrative the Thornfields had tried to create. More importantly, other Westfield Prep students began coming forward with their own stories of harassment by Madison and her clique. The pattern of behavior that emerged painted a picture of systematic bullying that the school administration had not only ignored but actively enabled. Within 48 hours, the district attorney announced that all charges against Keisha were being dropped due to insufficient evidence and questions about the validity of the complaint. Detective Chen, who had led the biased investigation, was quietly reassigned to traffic duty. But the real victory came when the Department of Education launched a federal investigation into Westfield Prep's handling of harassment and discrimination complaints. The school's federal funding was placed under review, and Principal Davidson was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Madison Thornfield, faced with overwhelming evidence of her pattern of harassment, was expelled from Westfield Prep. Her parents' attempts to use their influence to overturn the decision were unsuccessful. The federal investigation had made the school hypersensitive to any appearance of favoritism. More significantly, Richard Thornfield's law firm lost several major clients who distanced themselves from the family after the true story became public. The intimidation tactics that had worked in private were exposed to public scrutiny, damaging the family's reputation irreparably. The civil rights lawsuit that Jessica Martinez filed on Keisha's behalf was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum that ensured her college education would be fully funded. But more importantly, the settlement required Westfield Prep to implement comprehensive anti-bullying policies and provide sensitivity training for all staff and students. Keisha returned to school to find a dramatically changed environment. Students who had once ignored her harassment now went out of their way to include her. Teachers who had looked the other way during confrontations now actively worked to create inclusive classrooms. "It's strange," Keisha told Sensei Yamamoto during a training session weeks later. "I thought winning would feel different." "How does it feel?" he asked. "Lonely sometimes. Like I lost something in the process of fighting back." Yamamoto nodded wisely. "That's the burden of the warrior. When you stand up to injustice, you change not just the world around you, but yourself. You can never go back to being innocent of how cruel people can be. Do you think it was worth it? Look around you," he said, gesturing to the dojo where several new students were training, young people who had been inspired by Keisha's story to learn martial arts not as a weapon, but as a path to inner strength. "You didn't just win your case, Keisha. You showed other young people that they don't have to accept being victims. You proved that character and courage matter more than money and status. That's a victory that will ripple outward for years to come." 6 months later, Keisha graduated as valedictorian of Westfield Prep, her speech focusing on the importance of standing up for justice even when it's difficult. The same students who had once watched her being humiliated now gave her a standing ovation. In the audience, Dorothy Williams wiped away tears of pride as her daughter spoke about resilience, dignity, and the true meaning of strength. Beside her sat Sensei Yamamoto, whose weathered hands folded peacefully in his lap as he watched his student demonstrate the principles he had taught her. Madison Thornfield was notably absent, having transferred to a private school in another state where her family hoped to escape the consequences of their actions. But her absence was felt by no one. The toxic atmosphere she had created had been replaced by something healthier and more inclusive. As Keisha walked across the stage to receive her diploma, her braces caught the light one final time. She had gotten them removed the week before, but she wore a retainer that still glinted when she smiled. She was no longer the scared scholarship student who had tried to make herself invisible in the hallways. She was Keisha Williams, valedictorian, national judo champion, civil rights advocate, and young woman who had proven that real strength comes not from money or status, but from the courage to stand up for what's right. The local news interviewed her after graduation, asking about her plans for the future. "I'm going to study law," she said, her smile bright and confident. "I want to help other young people who find themselves in situations like mine. I want to make sure that the system protects everyone, not just those who can afford protection." "Any advice for other students facing bullying or discrimination?" Keisha thought for a moment, remembering the scared girl who had started at Westfield just a year ago. "Don't let anyone convince you that you deserve to be treated badly," she said. "And remember that real strength isn't about fighting. It's about having the courage to stand up for yourself and others, even when it's scary. You're stronger than you know, and you're never as alone as you think." As the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds dispersed, Keisha stood with her mother and Sensei Yamamoto, looking back at the school that had tried to break her spirit. "Ready to go home?" Dorothy asked. "Ready," Keisha replied. But as they walked toward the parking lot, she paused and looked back one more time. Westfield Prep still stood imposing against the evening sky, its marble facades and manicured grounds speaking of wealth and privilege. But it was no longer the intimidating fortress it had once seemed. It was just a building, populated by people who were no better or worse than anyone else, regardless of their bank accounts. The real victory wasn't in defeating Madison Thornfield or exposing the corruption at the school. The real victory was in discovering that she had always been strong enough to stand up for herself. She had just needed to remember who she was. As they drove away from Westfield Prep for the last time, Keisha felt a sense of peace settling over her. The scared girl with braces who had walked these halls was gone, replaced by a young woman who knew her own worth and wouldn't let anyone convince her otherwise. The fight was over, but the victory would last a lifetime. And somewhere out there, other young people facing their own bullies would hear her story and find the courage to stand up for themselves. That was the real championship, not the medals on her wall, but the knowledge that she had used her strength to make the world a little bit more just. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.